Have you ever wondered about the environmental costs of a private jet? In our world today, the use of private jets is no longer a rarity among the ultra-rich. It's become an emblem of their status, a symbol of their affluence and convenience. But beyond the glitz and glamour, there's a more pressing issue at hand: the carbon footprint of these luxury air travels. Let's talk about what a carbon footprint is. Simply put, it's the total amount of greenhouse gases produced to directly and indirectly support human activities. This usually is expressed in equivalent tons of carbon dioxide, known as CO2. Now, how do private jets fit into this? Well, they contribute quite a bit. Private jets are notorious for their fuel inefficiency. They burn an exorbitant amount of fuel for the convenience of a select few passengers. This results in a massive carbon footprint per passenger, much greater than that of a commercial flight or other forms of transportation. To put it in perspective, consider this. A flight from New York to London on a private jet produces around 7 times more CO2 per person compared to a commercial flight. That's right, 7 times more. And let's not even start on the comparison with a train journey or a car ride, where the difference is even starker. This is a disproportionate environmental impact. Every private jet in the sky represents a significant addition to global CO2 emissions, and with the growing trend of private jet use, this impact is only set to increase. It's a grave concern that needs addressing. So, next time you see a private jet soaring high in the sky, remember, it's not just a symbol of wealth and status. It's also a symbol of environmental destruction. Private jets, a symbol of wealth and status, are also symbols of environmental destruction. Let's take a look at a well-known ultra-rich individual who frequently uses private jets. Picture this: a high-profile billionaire with a penchant for luxurious travel, jetting off to various corners of the world on a whim. This jet-setter, who we'll call Mr. Lux, isn't alone. He's part of an elite club of the ultra-rich who see private jets as their personal taxi service. Now let's delve into the frequency of Mr. Lux's flights. On average, he hops on his private jet around 3 times a week. That's more than 150 flights a year. Each trip varies from short domestic hops to long-haul international flights, from business meetings in New York to vacationing in the French Riviera to attending a friend's wedding in Bali. Mr. Lux's destinations are as diverse as they are numerous. What's the environmental impact of each journey, you ask? Well, it's staggering. A single flight in a private jet can produce up to 20 times more carbon dioxide per passenger than a commercial flight. So every time Mr. Lux takes off, he's contributing a hefty amount of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Multiply that by his 150 or so flights a year, and the magnitude of the problem becomes clear. What's more, these flights aren't filled to capacity. Often it's just Mr. Lux and a handful of his entourage on board. So the already high carbon footprint per passenger skyrockets even further. It's a case of maximum emissions for minimal passenger load. The environmental cost is, simply put, immense. But the story doesn't end there. It's not just about the carbon emissions from the flights themselves. The production and maintenance of these private jets, the infrastructure required at airports for their exclusive use, and the disposal of old jets also contribute substantially to environmental degradation. To sum it up, the environmental cost of their convenience is immense. The lifestyle of the ultra-rich jet-setter, epitomized by Mr. Lux, is a significant contributor to the climate crisis. The question then arises, can we afford to let this continue unchecked? So how does a private jet compare to a commercial flight, you might ask? Well, let's dive right into it. When it comes to carbon emissions, private jets are the heavyweight champions. A private jet emits up to 20 times more carbon dioxide per passenger mile than a commercial flight. This massive disparity is due to a few factors: fuel efficiency, the number of passengers, and flight routes. Firstly, let's talk about fuel efficiency. Fuel efficiency in aviation is a measure of how much fuel an aircraft consumes to travel a certain distance. In this regard, private jets are less efficient than their commercial counterparts. They are typically older models, with less advanced fuel-guzzling engines. Moreover, private jets often fly with fewer passengers, which means the fuel consumption per passenger is much higher than on commercial flights. Next, we look at the number of passengers. The fewer the passengers, the higher the carbon emissions per person. A private jet, often carrying just one or two people, is a stark contrast to a commercial airliner packed with hundreds of passengers. This means the carbon footprint for each passenger on a private jet is significantly larger than for those on commercial flights. Lastly, flight routes play a significant role. Private jets have the luxury of direct point-to-point travel, often to smaller airports that commercial flights can't access. While this is convenient for the jet setter, it is disastrous for the environment. These direct routes, coupled with frequent takeoffs and landings, contribute to higher fuel consumption and thus higher emissions. In conclusion, the carbon footprint of a private jet is significantly larger than that of commercial flights. Convenience, luxury and exclusivity come at a huge environmental cost. It's high time we question whether this convenience is worth the damage it inflicts on our planet. In terms of environmental impact, private jets are far worse than commercial flights. Why is it that the ultra-rich feel the need to rely so heavily on private jets? Let's delve into the social norms among this exclusive group that encourage such a heavy dependence on private jet use. For the ultra-rich, convenience is king. They place an enormous value on their time, often equating it to money. For them, private jets offer an opportunity to bypass the lines, the crowds, and the unpredictability of commercial air travel. They can jet off to their destinations at a moment's notice, without the hassle of coordinating with commercial flight schedules. Alongside convenience, privacy is another powerful motivator. In their opulent bubbles, the ultra-rich are accustomed to a certain level of seclusion, a privilege they can extend to their air travel by choosing private jets. This privacy allows them to conduct business meetings, travel with family, or simply enjoy their solitude in peace, away from prying eyes. There's also the element of status. Private jets are a potent symbol of wealth and power. They're a way for the ultra-rich to distinguish themselves from the merely rich, to flaunt their financial prowess. For some, the allure of private jets isn't just about the convenience or privacy, but about the sheer prestige associated with it. However, let's not forget the most common justification. The ultra-rich often argue that they offset their carbon emissions through various environmental initiatives. While these efforts are commendable, they can't negate the fact that a single private jet flight can produce as much as 20 times the carbon emissions of a commercial flight. We've seen how the ultra-rich justify their private jet use. They value the convenience, the privacy, and the status it offers. They believe they're doing enough by offsetting their emissions. But it's crucial to question the environmental impact of these choices. But at what cost does this convenience come? We can't ignore the environmental toll that private jet use is taking on our planet. Despite their justifications, the ultra-rich must be held accountable for their contribution to the climate crisis. As we continue to grapple with the urgency of climate change, the extravagant convenience of private jets must be re-evaluated. It's clear that the environmental impact of private jets is significant, so what can be done about it? Let's take a moment to consider the current lack of regulation in the private jet industry. You see, the existing rules are largely lenient, allowing the ultra-rich to fly privately almost as they please, with little regard for the environmental implications. This laissez-faire approach is in stark contrast to the strict regulations that govern commercial airlines and public transportation. So, how can we address this gap in regulation? Well, one potential solution would be to impose taxes on private jet usage. These taxes could be based on the carbon emissions of each flight, thus giving jet owners a financial incentive to reduce their environmental impact. This approach has the added benefit of generating revenue that could be invested in green initiatives or used to offset the carbon footprint of the private jet industry. Another possible solution is to implement stricter emission standards for private jets. Currently, these aircraft are often less fuel efficient than their commercial counterparts, partly because they are not subject to the same emission standards. By tightening these standards, we could force the industry to innovate and develop more eco-friendly technologies. Flight restrictions could also play a part in curbing the environmental impact of private jets. For instance, regulations could limit the number of flights that each jet can make in a given period, or restrict the use of private jets during peak travel times. These measures would not only reduce emissions, but also alleviate the congestion and noise pollution caused by private jets. Of course, these are just a few of the many potential solutions. The key point is that regulation is both necessary and feasible. With the right policies in place, we can limit the environmental impact of private jets, without denying the ultra-rich the convenience they crave. So let's not shy away from this challenge. Instead, let's embrace it. Let's push for stronger regulation and hold the private jet industry accountable for its environmental footprint. After all, the health of our planet should never be compromised for the sake of luxury. It's time for change in the private jet industry. So, what can you do to help? It's time to get proactive. The private jet industry, in its current form, is a luxury that our planet can no longer afford. But change is possible, and it begins with us. Let's start with a simple but powerful tool: our voice. We can raise awareness about the environmental impact of private jet use. Share the facts, discuss the issue, and let's get the conversation going. Our voices together can create a chorus that's too loud to ignore. But words are not enough. We need to translate our voices into action. That means supporting policies that regulate private jet use. It's not about taking away the privileges of the ultra-rich, but about ensuring that these privileges aren't causing harm to our shared environment. There are various ways we can do this. One way is to vote. We can elect leaders who prioritize the environment and are willing to regulate industries that contribute significantly to carbon emissions. Remember, every vote counts. Your vote can be a catalyst for change. Another way is to lobby. Reach out to your local and national representatives, urging them to consider regulations on private jet use. It might seem daunting, but remember, these representatives work for us, the people. They need to hear our concerns and our demands. Furthermore, we can support organizations that are working towards these goals. Many environmental groups are fighting for stricter regulations on industries that contribute to climate change. Your support, whether it's through volunteering or donating, can help these organizations make a greater impact. Finally, we can make personal choices that reflect our commitment to the environment. Opt for sustainable modes of transport whenever possible. While most of us don't have the option of flying private, we can still make choices that reduce our carbon footprint. The skies belong to all of us. Let's ensure they're not polluted by the few. The time for change is now. Let's make sure our skies remain clear and blue for generations to come. After all, we only have one planet. Let's make sure we treat it with the respect it deserves.